little opportunities can become big opportunities. And you don't necessarily know what that big opportunity is going to be. And you don't necessarily recognize that the little opportunity that you have before you is one of those that's going to somehow blossom in the future. Take advantage of the little opportunities. Knock them out of the park.
Welcome to the Long Blue Leadership Podcast, presented by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation. These are powerful conversations with United States Air Force Academy graduates who have lived their lives with distinction. All leaders of character who candidly share their stories, including their best and worst moments, the challenges they've overcome, the people and events that have shaped who they are, and who willingly lend their wisdom to advance your leadership journey. Your host for this edition of Long Blue Leadership is Dr. Doug Lindsay, USAFA class of 92, speaker, author, leadership consultant, and currently serving the Center for Character and Leadership Development as Executive Director of the Journal of Character and Leadership Development. And now, Dr. Doug Lindsay.
My guest today is Brigadier General Linell Letendre, Air Force Academy class of 1996 and Dean of the Faculty. The General oversees 750 faculty members and more than 500 undergraduate courses for 4,000 cadets across 32 academic disciplines. She also directs the operation of 5 support staff agencies and faculties with attendant resources valued at more than $350 million. General Letendre graduated the Academy with distinction, receiving a Bachelor of Science degree in astronautical engineering. She's served as an acquisition officer. She's been a judge advocate general and is barred at the U.S. Supreme Court, Supreme Court of Washington, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, and the Air Force Court of Criminal Appeals. Prior to her current assignment, she served as a permanent professor and head of the Air Force Academy's Department of Law. We'll talk with General Letendre about her life prior to becoming a cadet and what her experience was like at the Academy as a cadet. We'll ask about the progression of her career from acquisitions to the practice of law to the Dean of the Faculty. Finally, we'll ask the General to share some advice for leaders and a few takeaways for those who want to be leaders. General Letendre, welcome to Long Blue Leadership.
Well, thank you, Doug. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's kind of jump right in. Can you talk a little bit about what your life was like prior to the Academy and what it was like growing up with your family?
Well, according to the cadets, that's talking about what happened in the Stone Ages. But growing up as a kid, I was not a military brat, but I was what we affectionately call a corporate brat. So we moved about every 4 to 5 years with my father's job. He actually worked at the time for Rockwell International. And so as a family, similar to military families, we were pretty tight. I have an amazing younger brother named Paul. My parents, Don and Glenn, we did a lot of camping and hiking and enjoying being placed in a variety of states and places. What's interesting about a corporate brat versus a military brat, though, is that you tend to enter into communities that aren't used to people arriving or aren't used to people moving in quite as often. And so I've actually found that my kids had a different experience because they tended to be embraced by the military community. But that moving around kept us close as a nuclear family, and just can't thank my folks enough for raising me with those values, that belief in family, the importance of giving back to your community. I had a great childhood.
That's great. And so with that kind of moving around and I like that phrase of a corporate brat, right? Because it, I think, allows us to think about that differently, because we know the military moves around a lot, but we sometimes don't tend to think that other people do that as well. What were some of those influences that as you grew up that really had an impact on you? Obviously, family was really important, but what else was there? Was it things you read, people you met, experienced mentors? What was that?
Well, part, I think, was that resiliency that you get when you're the new kid and it's October in class and you're going from algebra class to geometry class, and boy, you missed that first foundational set of proofs. And so that resiliency of, it's going to be okay. Change is fine. You get comfortable with change. Other things that focused me, you mentioned things that you read. We had different opportunities then by each new library that we went to. My mom was a librarian, and so reading was vital and something that was expected in my family. And one day in a new school, I walked into the elementary school's library, and I discovered a new section. It was called the biographies. And I decided in second grade that I was going to start with A and work my way through the alphabet. And was a little miffed when the librarian told me I could only check out two books a week. So apparently I was destined to be dean at some point. But what I learned from that is that by diving into others' lives through reading their biographies, you learned as a young child that everyone comes from different experiences. Everyone has different challenges, and maybe yours aren't so as insurmountable as you might think. And so I value that experience that I had, being able to move from community to community, to see different parts of the United States, and to really learn that people are people no matter where you're living.
Those are some great lessons, especially learning them early on. Were there any particular biographies that really kind of resonated with you that you kind of remember? Or was it just the process of that discovery of people's journeys?
Well, I will say I was a little keen on Amelia Earhart's biography. And so maybe that was an early indication that maybe someday I'd end up in the Air Force, although in second grade I had no idea. And so those explorers, those people who were willing to push boundaries, to take risk, I tended to be drawn to them a little bit more than others.
And we'll come back to that idea of kind of pushing boundaries and taking risk here in a little bit. So what was it that happened during that process that you said, hey, this military thing might be okay, the academy, that sounds like something. What was that process like as you tried to think about what you wanted to do when you grew up?
Well, I mentioned my dad worked for Rockwell International. Believe it or not, he was in the automotive section. Not everyone thinks of Rockwell as building the space shuttle. But because he was in Rockwell, he got a model of the space shuttle and he brought it home. And I was still in elementary school. I still have this model of the space shuttle. It has sat on my desk or in my office for my entire career as a reminder of what got it all started. And as a kid, I learned exactly how that space shuttle operated, when the boosters fell off and the main engine, why they painted it and then didn't paint it. You remember all the changes that the space shuttle had. And that really got me started thinking about space. When as many little kids, I grew up deciding I was going to be an astronaut. And it was later at a corporate picnic that I ran into two high school boys. They were probably at this point 6 years older than me. And they were going to this amazing thing called a service academy. One was going to West Point. One was going to the Naval Academy. I had never heard of service academies before. We lived in East Tennessee. And I was like, what are those? And then they started talking and I started researching a little bit. And then I was a smart kid. So I decided, well, I don't want to go there. I want to go to the Air Force Academy. And so that actually from fifth grade on really became the dream for me, that I wanted to come here to the Air Force Academy, major in astronautical engineering, and then go on to be an astronaut. Well, I did the first couple. And my study partner and classmate, Jack Fisher, he did make it up into space, but I got to just watch him from with my 2 feet firmly planted on the ground.
Okay. And let's talk about that a little bit. So getting to the academy, that was where you want to go. That was kind of your vision. You get here. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of those highs and lows, lessons learned, and what was that like kind of now you're getting here, you're working along your path, your dream, and then all of a sudden day-to-day life? What was that like?
Well, I think like many folks who arrive at the academy, especially those of us who come from small towns, I mean, you were a big deal, right? In a little bitty town. I came here from a different move. We were living in South Carolina at the time, Rock Hill, South Carolina. And boy, when I got an appointment to the Air Force Academy, I mean, it was a high school assembly to hand me my appointment. It was front page news of the Rock Hill Herald world. So it was a big deal. And then you arrive and wow, you're with 1,300 other classmates is the size of our class when we started, not the size when we ended, but, and they were all big deals too. And it was humbling. It was humbling being around people who were just as dedicated, who had such amazing work ethic. And I can't say enough about my toughest bricks classmates from the class of '96. They're inspiring. They helped challenge you to be better than you thought were possible. So we did have highs and lows. We had good times and challenging times. We had times but through it all, we bonded and we knew we'd be there for each other. While I was at the academy, I did a variety of things. You've already mentioned my major, but I was a soaring instructor pilot. I was on the mock trial team. I got to participate in a number of leadership positions, to include the spring semester cadet wing commander, which was probably just the highlight of my time, to be able to really practice those leadership. How you mess up, how you get better, how do you inspire people, and I really credit the Air Force Academy for helping to round me out, to provide those experiences where I was allowed to fail, but I was also allowed to pick myself back up, to learn from it, and to move on.
Going back to that theme of resilience that you'd mentioned earlier, is there a particular failure moment or time that you're like, this is not who I want to be, or this is not who I think I am, that you kind of caught yourself and allowed you to kind of move on to the next level? Or was there anything?
I'll give a couple, and one sounds little, but I did learn from it. I was the cadet wing commander, and the 4th class broke ranks and took the hill. And I knew that the then deputy commandant was going to be calling me up to his office, asking why I didn't have control of the wing, and et cetera, et cetera. And so, what did I do beforehand? I called up the president of the 4th class, the class of '99, and I just yelled. And as I walked away, I went, "Really? Is that leadership? Is that setting the expectation that I want? Is that really how I'm going to behave as a lieutenant?" And it caused me to think about, we might need a different approach. We might need to think about how we develop 4th class cadets in a different way. And so I still remember that moment of being disappointed in myself, in my leadership approach. And I'll reflect on that sometimes of when things aren't going right, what are your obligations as a leader to set your people up for success? And it doesn't mean that you just pull them aside and yell at them. That's not how we work in our Air Force and Space Force today. Instead, we've got to set expectations. We have to hold folks to accountability standards. But then we also have to understand, well, why didn't we meet a particular mission set or a particular standard, and try to understand at a little bit deeper level. I'm just grateful that I had an opportunity to learn that, at least in that case, the hard way.
Well, the hard way, but in a developmental way, right? So being able to learn that now, like you said, until you got out on active duty, and because when you kind of grow up in a system, that becomes normal, right? And so, had that been propagated forward, that could have been, the stakes could have been higher, right?
Absolutely. And it's one thing that I'm so proud of where the Academy has come and where we're also heading. I see our cadets today, and I'll just flash forward a little bit. We'll get back to your questions here in a minute, Doug, but let's flash forward to COVID. We knew that we were going to be sending the upper 3 classes home. And my husband, who's also a classmate, Linell Letendre, he knew that we were going to make this announcement, and I had given him the exact time that he was allowed to contact our sponsor cadets. We had 2 sponsor cadets. They were sophomores at the time, 3 degrees. And And he called right after he knew the announcement was going to be made and said, "Do you need a ride? How can we help? Do you need a ride to the airport?" And each of those 3 degrees said, "No, Mr. Letendre, actually, we need to take care of our 4 degrees first. We're going to make sure they're all set, that they've got either a ride home or a trip to the airport. Then we'll worry about ourselves." That's where I think the Air Force Academy has made just incredible strides in thinking about that service before self, that what it means to lift others as a leader at character. And boy, I think we've just made amazing strides, and I can't wait to see where the Academy heads from here.
Yeah, that's a pretty humbling story as you kind of sit back and go, wow, just for them to embrace that even early on, right? It's 3 degrees to go. I've got some ownership, not just of myself, but in the development of those that have been put in my charge, right? It's a pretty amazing opportunity to get in there, and how to make you feel a little bit proud also, right? To be able to watch that go through, that they picked up on that. Because we know not everybody graduates with that same depth of appreciation, I think, of that, right? So that's very cool. Yeah. So you went to the academy, had a lot of success, obviously, and then kind of went into acquisition, which is a little bit different than with your astronautical engineering degree. So you spent your first 2 years in operations, and then between about 98 and 2019, focused on the area of law and practicing that in a lot of leadership positions. Could you talk a little bit about kind of lessons learned along the way, what you did that, and how that kind of set you up to be the dean of the faculty, of which may not have been a career goal of yours when you graduated, right?
No, not at all. I will say, though, that when I graduated from the academy, what I did know, really as a result of being a soaring instructor pilot, is I love to teach. I love to lead, and I love to teach. And so that idea of teaching, I found there were lots of opportunities to do that along the way. Absolutely, I was after I graduated from law school, I was able to serve in any number of legal roles, from trial attorney to appellate attorney, advising commanders, leading legal offices. But at every stage, no matter how large the leadership job became, what I found that I fell back to over and over again were those teaching skills. And whether it's describing a legal challenge and how a commander can take risk, where that spectrum of options are, and really thinking through to make decisions, those teaching skills were fundamental to at least my style of how I approached the legal profession. I also got a chance to come back here as a captain and teach on faculty, and really this notion of developing those who are also coming behind you. And whether that was developing cadets when I was on faculty, or later leading various legal offices and developing those younger JAGs and paralegals, that really was my niche, and a passion for helping to promote those who really are the future of our Air Force and now the Space Force. And so it was through those opportunities, I think, that sealed the deal, that when the role of permanent professor for law came open, I threw my name in the hat and was so fortunate when I got the call from then Brigadier General Armacost, letting me know that I had gotten that job and came out here to lead that department, and then to really start to give back to this academy.
That idea of, I think, is very an important but a subtle one. That idea of, we're not just leading our teams to be their best and all that, but also pouring into them the opportunity to kind of develop, and that teaching skill to be able to kind of teach the teachers, right? To be able to kind of help do that. And how have you been able to do that kind of as you've moved up, right? Because sometimes as you know, move up in the leadership ranks, you lose that connection with kind of the front line and being able to really the classroom and being in there where the teaching really happens?
Yeah, I think part of it is how you set that vision, that strategy for moving forward. I went through a great leadership program out at Harvard. In fact, this particular class was taught by retired Brigadier General Dana Bourne, who asked us to think about your leadership mantra. What is it about what you do, regardless of if they made you the dean of the faculty or they put you in any job, either in the military or outside the military. And as I wrestled with that, I came up with mine, and it's blasting crews to future universes. This notion or this idea that I'm not going to be alongside, whether it's my younger faculty or these cadets after they graduate, in that future universe. But what is it that we have to do to support them, to challenge them, to inspire them, such that as they get to that future destination, that they're ready and that they're equipped? I believe my role and our role as senior leaders at the Air Force Academy is to not necessarily predict the future with any certainty. I think I might know who our next adversary is going to be in conflict, but the United States has been wrong before. I certainly don't know what strides the technology is going to take between here and there. I do know, though, that it's going to be the mental agility and the capabilities and skill sets that we are providing both to our cadets, our first graduating class, but also something we talk about, our second graduating class, which is those faculty that are going to go back out into the Air Force and Space Force. It is that challenge of how do we help them be ready for whatever's coming their way? How do we future-proof them? And that's what I see my role as the Dean of Faculty being.
So can you talk a little bit more about that idea, right? So that first graduating class, I think that makes sense, right? Sending the future officers out in the Air and Space Forces. But that second class as well, right? That those advocates, those champions of kind of not just learning and what everything that we're trying to do. What does that look like in terms of you've got 750 faculty, you've got 4,000 cadets. Both of those components are very important. How do you really lean into that one about thinking about how we're sending our folks out back to the service?
Well, one of the ways that we do that is we've got a pretty clear mission statement now at the Dean of Faculty. We support, obviously, the Air Force Academy's larger mission, which is to develop leaders of character. Within the Dean of Faculty, though, we believe our portion of that is to educate and inspire warfighter scholars. So this confluence of not just a warfighter ethos, but also the disciplinary and, more importantly, the interdisciplinary understanding and expertise to be able to apply that to future conflict. And so when we think about graduating both of those classes, we have become very deliberate within the Dean of Faculty and really across the entire institution, and we are laser focused on that future fight. So how do we do that? And this is where I think the Academy has changed remarkably. And I love talking to classes who come back for their reunions. But what's fundamentally changed, I think, since our time at the Air Force Academy and now, is that not only is that curriculum laser focused on the future fight, but it's those experiential learning opportunities that we're providing. That ability to take what you're learning in the classroom and then going and solving real-world research problems that are helping the warfighter. The Air Force Academy, Doug, you may know, is the number one funded undergraduate research institution in the country. We do over $40 million worth of research every single year. And that goes across all disciplines. And not only is that helping our cadets learn how to apply or to think through different challenges that the warfighters are facing, but it also helps our faculty that are alongside them who are working through those very same research challenges. And so that's where we get this idea of graduating two classes and how we help to shape, to focus that future fight both in and outside of the classroom.
Yeah. So as you think back it must be kind of neat in your position now to think back to Cadet Letendre back in the day.
And I was Cadet Bartholic back then,
that's true,
too.
That's right. To be able to think about the experience you had and how impactful that was for you, and now with the resources and the opportunity, the IFC and other things that are out there available to really help prepare cadets, because it's not just about learning, but it's about learning how to learn, right? The whole process and being able to partner with other organizations, right? That's got to be pretty cool to see that transformation over time, right?
It is. And I'll just give you a little example. You've probably heard of the FalconSat program. Well, I actually worked on something that predated FalconSat. The first time the cadets were briefing me about the history of FalconSat, they didn't even include the work that my class did with Falcon Gold. They've since updated the slide. But we were working with any number of majors from electrical engineering to astronautical engineering to mechanical engineering. But we had literally dusted off a closet that I think the mechanical engineering department loaned out to the astro department, right? There's no such thing as a clean room. We're working on the development of a very simple satellite that we thought we might launch on a high altitude balloon. Flash forward to today. Not only do we have investment from other DoD entities like AFRL and Space Force, but we have profound investment from our graduate community that is making FalconSat the premier undergraduate institution that is not only designing, developing, building, launching, and then flying satellites. I only half-jokingly say that the United States Air Force Academy has more satellites in orbit than most small countries because it's true. And those satellites, these cadets, and those opportunities that they have to take what they're learning in the classroom, to apply it, and then they're actually, once on orbit, working some DoD missions as well. And it's been a remarkable operation to watch. And sometimes I just shake my head and imagine, boy, if only Jack Fisher and I could get back here in this astrolab, how much fun we would have.
Right. So you mentioned the graduate community, their involvement as well, right? So we have other corporate entities and all that doing that as well. Can you talk a little bit about the value of that kind of giving back, not just through supporting the academy, but that involvement, that active involvement in the learning process and what that's like?
Yeah, that giving back is critical. I like to think of it as those sparks that if you think about what venture capitalists do, right? They provide a spark, and whether that's through seed money to try something new and different, whether that's through expertise and the use of time and knowledge as a resource. That's where I've seen grads giving back to the Air Force Academy in really a variety and spectacular ways. You know, from our Institute of Future Conflict to this fall, where we're going to open up the new Madeira Cyber Innovation Center, which is going to revolutionize how we not only think, teach, but also research with respect to the cyber domain. To the Martinson Honors Program, which is just a phenomenal opportunity for our cadets who are at the cutting edge of thinking about interdisciplinary work through an academic lens. We're working now on the potential to have that kind of investment in the Academic Success Center to make sure that all of our cadets are able to take on our challenging coursework. Any number of ways that as I walk through the halls, as I walk through our research labs, as I talk to our faculty, or as I see cadets taking part in clubs and activities, NCLS, the Academy couldn't do what it does today without that support that we get not only from graduates, but from foundations as well as corporations around the world.
So, and I appreciate that ability of the opportunity to stay connected, right? So it's not just kind of up on the hill. It's being able, lots of opportunities and ways to serve and give back. And as you talk through those different opportunities and talk through about the Cyber Center, the IFC, all of the Martinson, all of that, it sounds like as we think about kind of the great power competition and what's going on, that we're setting our cadets up for success in being able to be involved and really help to influence that moving forward, right?
Absolutely. And we want our grads to be better than we ever were. And I can say unabashedly that they are. Our second lieutenants who are graduating from this institution are better able on day one to take on the challenges that our nation has thrown at them. And we need an institution that continues to not only rise to that challenge, but continues to change, that gets better over time, and that remains at this point laser focused on great power competition. And that's what I'm seeing, not just out of the faculty and academic staff in DF, but across the institution, our AOCs, our AMTs, our coaches. Every one of us knows what our mission is and the challenges that our second lieutenants are going to be facing on day one. I couldn't be more proud of what this academy is doing.
And I think you hit on an important part there, because as I think about my experience a few years before yours with True Blue 92, I have to put that in there. That ability to really see, I think, people's place in the overall mission, because I think previously, it was really easy to kind of stay stovepipe, stay in your lane, think about, okay, I'm just going to kind of be here to teach. But it seems like there's been a broadening of my purpose, right? As a person comes into the academy, be it permanent party, faculty, staff, anywhere, to really say, I've got a place here. I know what my place is, and I know how I contribute to the larger mission. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's all wrapped up in our mission to develop leaders of character, and this notion and idea that I first have to live honorably. That's taking care of who I am. That's that honor code that we all espouse to, that integrity that we bring with us day in and day out. But then that next phase of that leader of characters is that we need to lift others. We need to lift all of those around us, because we know that if we don't get the best out of every member of our team, we're never going to get to the final stage, which is that performance piece, that ability to accomplish the mission. And so I think that leader of character framework, which is helping us to really center not just cadets, but permanent party around one goal. And so you see that, and everyone really does understand how they're contributing to that overarching mission, and they're all in.
Right. And what I like about that kind of orienting function of developing leaders of character is because it puts a responsibility on me too, to go, if I'm going to develop leaders of character, then I need to think about how I'm showing up am I a leader of character, and how I do that so I can kind of model and orient as well, right? So I like that kind of responsibility it puts on me as a faculty or staff member to go, I need to make sure I'm showing up the way I need to, so that I can help them show up the way they need to as well, right?
Absolutely. And that is probably the part that makes me the most proud as I wander the hallways or show up at a sporting event or watching our cadets engage in military training exercises. I'm not only seeing them live that day in and day out, but I see those permanent party who are setting that role model and example just across the board.
Yeah, that's got to be, very satisfying to be able
I have
to see
the best
that.
job in the Air Force
That's
and
great.
Space Force.
So kind of wrapping up, can you maybe share through the journey that you've had, maybe some lessons you've kind of learned about leadership along the way? Obviously, you've been very successful at every level you've done, and that doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen without work. So what were some of those lessons that you learned along the way, whether it was early on in acquisitions, it was in your log, or now as the dean, that you'd like to pass on?
One of the lessons that I've learned is that little opportunities can become big opportunities. And you don't necessarily know what that big opportunity is going to be. And you don't necessarily recognize that the little opportunity that you have before you is one of those that's going to somehow blossom in the future. And so when I talk with cadets, I talk about take advantage of the little opportunities, knock them out of the park. I'll share a little opportunity. I was legal counsel on a case that had a potential to go to the United States Supreme Court. And I was brought in I was a major. I was brought in with all of the judge advocate generals from all of the services. So these are 2 and 3 stars who were sitting down with the general counsel of the Department of Defense. At the time, Mr. J. Johnson. He later became Secretary Johnson and head of the Department of Homeland Security. And so they're having this conversation about whether or not this case should go to the Supreme Court. And at the conclusion, Mr. Johnson passes around a memo and says, "Hey, does this need any editing? Is this what we want to send to DOJ, to the Department of Justice, to the Attorney General?" And everyone around the table, except for me, nodded their head up and down. "Looks great, sir. Looks great." And I looked at it. I'm like, this memo could be improved. And I started to edit it. And on the way out, I handed it off to Mr. Johnson's exec and said, "Hey, I think this could use a little improvement here and there. Here's some thoughts." It wasn't about a month or so later that I then got a call from my judge advocate general, Lieutenant General Rives, who said, "Mr. Johnson wants that major." That major had the audacity to edit his memo to come and help serve as the legal counsel, as well as one of the prime authors of the report regarding the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I would have never expected that editing a little paper or a memo would have led then to this enormous opportunity to work directly for General Ham, Army 4-star, as well as Mr. Johnson. And so I think how you think about the little opportunities that then become the big opportunities is one leadership lesson that I would pass along.
Well, and we could spend probably another couple hours unpacking one, you had to have the knowledge to understand what was there. So there's a competency piece, but there's also a courage piece to kind of lean out a little bit when you're maybe outranked around the room and everybody else is kind of saying, "Yeah, this is the way to go," but that there's something else that's there, right?
Yeah, and I think that leads maybe to a second leadership lesson is you've got to find your voice. And oftentimes when I talk to cadets, they're like, "Oh, well, easy for you to say, ma'am. You've got a star on. Of course, you've got a voice." But I think that unless you practice having that voice early in your career, you practice what it means to be candid. You practice what it means to speak up for the right thing. It doesn't actually get easier just because you've got rank. It gets easier through practice. And so that's one of those lessons that we talk with cadets about all the time. How do they find their voice today on the small things so that when they need to have a voice on the big things, they've had some practice before?
I love that idea of practice and kind of embracing the moment, right? We think a lot of times people make that mistake with leadership and think, well, I'm not in a leadership position, so I can't really lead. And we know that's just not true. So that idea of learning your voice, learning to lead, just really taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you so that you can then maybe down the road have the opportunity that's larger. So I appreciate those thoughts in there. As we think about kind of if people want to be connected. So if the listeners want to kind of connect more, find out more about the Academy, what are some things that they can do to kind of connect more with the Academy and find out more about what's going on?
Oh, absolutely. There's any variety of ways. Not only does our usafa.edu website contain information about all of our amazing programs and opportunities from athletics at gofalcons.com to what's up in the cadet wing, my amazing classmate and commandant, Brigadier General Gavin Marks, who is leading the cadet wing, but also any number of things that are going on the academic side as well. Every department's got a website. They talk about their current curriculum, their faculty, the research that they're doing. You are also welcome to follow me on my LinkedIn site or my Instagram page. The Soup has an amazing Instagram page as well. Lots of different ways through both social media as well as the internet to understand what we're doing. But I think one of the best ways is come on back. Come back to your academy. Come to a reunion. Talk to a grad. Talk to a cadet. Anytime I'm having a bad day, I pull a cadet aside and just chat for a few minutes. And believe me, it's going to make your day.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, your lessons, your leadership, your example, and thank you for your time today on Long Blue Leadership.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug.
Thank you for listening to Long Blue Leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe, share it with your family and friends, and post it to your social channels. Long Blue Leadership is a production of the Long Blue Line Podcast Network and presented by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation. The views and opinions of the guests and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the United States Air Force, Air Force Academy, Academy Association and Foundation, its staff, or management. The podcast drops every 2 weeks on Tuesday mornings. Subscribe to Long Blue Leadership on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn plus Alexa, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Search @Air Force Grads on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and more for show announcements and updates. And visit longblueleadership.org for past episodes and more Long Blue Line Podcast Network programming.